I can picture it. Walking into a police department, not to sell them a fleet of cars, but to ask for an application. My name's Barry. I'm 40, and I've built a good life over 20 years in car sales. But I never completely stopped wondering whether I could have followed my grandpa into law enforcement. So I decided to stop wondering and find out. Am I eligible? Am I ready? And is this the life I actually want now? Here is the funny part. Selling cars was never the dream. It was not even the backup dream. When I was 20, I needed a car. I went to the biggest dealership in town and negotiated so hard that the sales manager stopped looking at me like a customer and started looking at me like a recruit. He told me I had a natural feel for the business and asked whether I had ever considered selling cars. I had not, but I gave it a try and I was good at it. 1 year became 5, 5 became 10. I learned how to read a room, ask better questions, calm people down, solve problems, and keep moving when the first answer was no. Eventually, I worked my way up to sales manager. The job has been good to me. I've made good money, I've taken trips, driven nice cars, and built a solid family life. I'm not standing here at 40 complaining that everything went wrong. A lot went right. That is what makes this decision interesting. I'm not trying to escape a bad life. I'm trying to understand whether another meaningful piece still belongs inside the good life I already have. My dad sold furniture and worked a lot, so growing up I spent plenty of time with my grandpa. He started in patrol and retired as a senior detective. He had story after story from the job. I am pretty sure some of them became more exciting every time he told them, but that was part of the experience. What stayed with me was not one perfect quote or one dramatic case. It was the way he talked about the work, noticing details, solving problems, helping people, and following a question until it finally made sense. That sounded like a life with purpose. I wanted to become a police officer and eventually a detective like him. Then I made some bad choices after high school. I got into legal trouble, including a DUI, and I paid real consequences for it. When I got myself back on track, I applied to police departments more than once. I was rejected. I tried some college. It was not the right fit at the time. Then car sales appeared and life moved fast. I did not spend the next 20 years miserable. I built something I'm proud of, but the law enforcement question never completely left. When I turned 40, my wife and kids surprised me with a birthday cake covered in police decorations. That cake told me two things. First, my family has definitely heard this story a few times. Second, the idea was not as private as I thought. Turning 40 can make you look backward for a minute. At 20, 40 feels like a distant country. Then one morning, apparently, you live there. But I did not want this to become a story about time running out. I wanted it to become a question I could actually answer. The first small win was simply saying it clearly. I want to find out whether law enforcement still fits me. Not, I am quitting tomorrow. Not, I should have done this 20 years ago. Just, I'm going to find out. My first experiment was basic. Get the application. Read the actual requirements. Stop building the whole decision out of assumptions. The statewide Texas rules gave me a useful starting point. The ordinary minimum age for a peace officer license is 21. In the state rule I read, 40 was not listed as the problem. That was encouraging, but it was not a free pass. The process can include education requirements, fingerprints, a personal history statement, a background investigation, medical and psychological examinations, approved training, and a licensing exam. Applicants must also be legally able to drive and possess a firearm. Individual agencies can add their own hiring standards, and this part matters. Eligible to apply is not the same as licensed. Licensed is not the same as hired. Hired is not the same as becoming a detective. My old legal matters were later expunged, and agencies I contacted indicated that I may still be able to apply. But I'm not treating that as a guarantee. A specific agency still has to review my actual history and make its own decision. So the second small win was not an acceptance letter. It was better information. The question changed from, did I miss my chance, to, what do I need to verify next? That is a much more useful question. Then I started looking at the last 20 years differently. Selling cars taught me to talk with people who are excited, nervous, skeptical, frustrated, or all four before lunch. I learned to listen for the real problem underneath the first objection. I learned to explain complicated choices in plain language. I learned that pushing harder is not always the answer. Sometimes the answer is slowing down, asking one better question, and giving somebody room to think. Police work is obviously not car sales. The authority, risk, training, and responsibility are completely different. But communication is communication. Judgment is judgment. Leadership is leadership. At 40, I would not be starting with nothing. I would be bringing 20 years of experience working with people. That felt like another win. Then came the part where the dream had to survive a calendar, a fitness test, and a household budget. The current Texas Basic Peace Officer course is 736 hours. That is not a weekend seminar. Depending on the academy and agency, it can mean months of demanding classroom work, physical training, skills practice, testing, and field preparation. Fitness is one of my biggest questions. The state requires medical fitness for the duties, and departments can use their own physical tests. One current Texas department example uses push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5-mile run with published age-based benchmarks. I do not have a heroic training montage to report. Not yet. What I have is a measurable starting point. I can record what I can do now, train responsibly, and test again. That is more honest than saying, I will get in shape someday. Then there is the money. I have spent 20 years building my income and position. Starting over could mean less money, a different schedule, academy demands, and a major adjustment for my family. I cannot solve that with a motivational quote. I need a specific agency, a real compensation package, and an honest comparison that includes benefits, schedule, training pay, and what my family would be giving up. The goal does not get to pretend my responsibilities disappear just because the dream is meaningful. The biggest surprise was realizing that law enforcement is not one single door. Door one is the full-time sworn path: application, background process, academy, licensing, field training, patrol, and then maybe investigations later. The detective goal is real, but it's not an entry-level promise. For example, one large Texas department requires officers to spend at least 4 years in patrol before they're eligible to pursue detective or corporal. Agencies differ, but the point is the same. Detective is a horizon, not step one. Door two is a reserve or part-time officer path. That is still a licensed peace officer role. It's not casual volunteering, and it still carries serious standards and responsibility. Door three is civilian service. Texas police departments use volunteers for community events, record support, investigative research, citizens on patrol, and other non-enforcement work. Those programs vary too, and they have their own applications and background requirements. But that third door could let me test something important. Do I actually enjoy serving inside this world? Once it's more than a story in my head, that's the question I care about most. So here is what I can show my family now. I have the application path. I have the statewide baseline requirements. I know which questions are still open. I know fitness and income need facts, not optimism. And I know there is more than one responsible way to serve. What I do not have is permission to call myself a police officer. I have not been hired, licensed, sent to an academy, or promised a detective desk. Good. That was never the honest finish line for this first experiment. My answer is that this idea deserves a real test, but it doesn't require me to blow up my life tomorrow. For the next 90 days, I can do two things at once. First, choose a specific agency and confirm the application and background questions directly with the people responsible for answering them. Second, establish my fitness baseline and explore a community police or civilian volunteer program where I can learn what service actually feels like. Then I can bring my family evidence instead of a fantasy. At 20, I thought a career decision had to be one giant leap. At 40, I know better. I can test the dream in steps. I can ask direct questions. I can protect my family's stability. I can use the skills I already earned. And if the answer eventually becomes no, I will have clarity instead of another 20 years of wondering. Maybe I become a full-time officer. Maybe I find a reserve path. Maybe I keep selling cars and volunteer in a role that lets me serve and solve problems. Any of those answers could be worthwhile if it is based on the real experience instead of the version I imagined when I was a kid. Turning 40 did not create a crisis. It gave me enough perspective to finally run a responsible experiment. My name's Barry, I'm 40, I sell cars, and I am finally finding out where that little voice has been trying to lead me. If you have something you still want to explore after 40, you do not have to change your whole life today. Take one real step and see what opens up. And if you want more uplifting stories about what can happen after 40, like the video and subscribe.